And welcome to today's event. I'm Shaylin Stimson, so I'm the events manager here at Tech Manitoba. Thank you for joining us for today's Tech Mashup, Tech, Talent, and Belonging, where DEIB meets strategy. As we gather from Winnipeg, we would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Red River Métis. We recognize that our community and our work in technology sector benefit from these lands and resources here. At Tech Manitoba, we are committed to fostering respectful and inclusive spaces within the tech industry. We recognize the importance of Indigenous knowledge, creativity, and contributions in shaping innovation. As we work to advance technology and digital growth, we remain dedicated to building relationships with partnerships that respect Indigenous sovereignty and knowledge sharing and collaboration. We are grateful to live, learn, and work on these lands and are committed to working towards a future that represents the histories and contributions of Indigenous peoples in Manitoba and across Canada. So real quick, before we get started, I want to shout out a couple upcoming events. I know it gets a little quiet for the summer, but our partners over at Manitoba Innovates are running a Manitoba Invest Showcase. So that's going to be taking place next Thursday, June 26th in person. This event highlights Manitoba's thriving startup ecosystem, so attendees will connect with founders and explore innovative ventures supported by the Manitoba Invest Loan Program. You can discover the next wave of high-potential startups shaping our province's future. So Tony is just going to pop the link to register for that one in the chat. And then my favorite event of all, Manitoba Tech Week. So save the date. It is coming back for year 3. We are going to be the last week of February. So February 22nd to 28th. We're less than 8 months away at this point. So mark your calendars and make sure you're planning your vacation schedule around it so that you are in Manitoba the last week of February. This year is going to be bigger and better than ever. We're going to have more curated events, diverse locations, and activities for all ages. Now's a wonderful time to connect with me. If you are interested in any level of sponsorship, you can help elevate your brand, not just for the week, but for the lasting impact that MB Tech Week has all year round. Hosting applications are going to open in September. Summer is the perfect time to start brainstorming the kind of event you would like to host and bring to life. If you're not interested in sponsorship or hosting, no problem. I'm also looking for ideas and suggestions of the kind of events you want to see during Tech Week. So feel free to send me an email with any thoughts or creative ideas you might have there. And with no further ado, I'm thrilled to introduce Charlie Champagne, the manager of DEIB and talent acquisition at Payworks. Charlie joined Payworks in 2023 after spending over 2 decades in the manufacturing industry. Early in her career, she faced a fear that many of us can relate to, public speaking. But instead of shying away from it, she leaned in, and that experience sparked a journey into leadership, learning, development, and human resources. So now at Payworks, Charlie leads charge on building thoughtful, long-term strategies around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, as well as hiring. She's deeply committed to making sure the company lives out its purpose of doing right by people in ways that are meaningful, inclusive, and have a lasting impact. So please join me in welcoming Charlie Champagne.
Thank you so much, Shaylin. Welcome, everyone, again to this month's Tech Mashup, where we are going to talk about tech, talent, and belonging, and kind of see how they all intersect and the ways that we can integrate DEIB into our organizations, as well as, we're not just going to look at it from an organizational standpoint. I'm also going to kind of flip it to either side of the table. So whether you are looking for a job, trying to find someone to fill a role, or running an organization, part of an organization, the stuff that we're going to talk about today is going to have some really awesome relevance for everyone. So I am going to start sharing. There we go. All right. So I also look forward to, at the end of this, hanging around to answer some questions. There's going to be some Q&A. And I do want to thank Shaylin again for the introduction and also for starting us off in a good way with that beautiful land acknowledgement. So who am I, aside from the wonderful introduction that Shaylin provided, and why am I here talking to you today? So again, my name is Charlie Champagne. I use she, her pronouns, and I have been here with Payworks for almost 2 years now as their manager of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging and talent acquisition. Prior to that, I worked at a very large international organization where I also had my hand in their DEI programming. So there was no B at my previous organization. And if you're curious as to what the B is, if you didn't catch it while I was saying that, that is our belonging. So I have been in the DEI space, DEIB space unofficially for about 15 years and decided I wanted to make kind of a change. And how I came to Payworks was really just really kismet. I was looking passively for something, and the fact that DEIB was in the beginning of their job title really resonated with me, and I knew it would be a company that would really appreciate DEIB and want it to grow and nurture. So do I consider myself necessarily as kind of the be all end all authority of all things DEIB? Oh gosh, absolutely not. DEIB is a space that is constantly evolving and shifting. And as we learn and grow as a society, these learnings shift and evolve as well. And it is absolutely my personal and professional responsibility to never stop learning and growing. And can the DEIB space be a little overwhelming at times? Absolutely. But it is 100% worth it without a doubt. And I don't think I want to be in any other career ever again. So enough about me. Let's get into what you are going to be taking away from our tech mashup today. So we want to talk about how to turn DEIB from a compliance activity into a business advantage. So often in the media, we hear, DEI as just an acronym, as something that is maybe not in the best light right now in some climates. But when we look at it as a whole, as what actually DEIB is, we can see it as an integrated, embedded business advantage. And that's essentially kind of underlying what we're going to be talking about today. And we're going to go through 4 topics to get us there. How to integrate DEIB into your tech and talent strategies. We can't just have DEIB being a one and done within an organization or kind of an off-the-shelf initiative. It really makes the most sense and business advantage when it's integrated. How to use inclusive practices to attract and retain top talent. This is where my job title and responsibilities are so fabulous. I get to integrate DEIB and talent acquisition together in a very seamless way, which helps us to improve and expand on our retention and attraction policies and procedures. We'll also talk a little bit about building psychologically safe cultures that fuel innovation. When folks feel safe to be their authentic selves, they bring their favorite selves to work and do their best work. And finally, we are here for a tech mashup. So what would this talk be without a little bit of a foray into leveraging tech within our talent strategies and within our DEIB integration? So we're going to talk a little bit about how to leverage tech to reduce bias and increase equity, while also taking a look at some of the ethical implications of using AI and technology within our attraction and retention strategies. And I keep losing my mouse, but I'm going to get there. All right. So first topic we're going to go into, integrating DEIB into tech and talent strategies. Kind of a bit of a mouthful, but we want to look at DEIB as more than a committee, more than just a recognition of a day or a month here and there, and more than just having kind of that blanket statement on your website, because trust me, people are going to dig into that if that exists on your website. And before we dig in, as I alluded to before, DEIB may not be your forte. So I want to start us off with a little poll to take a quick pulse of the folks that are joining today. So you'll see the poll come up. I can see it over there. And please answer the following question and select your your answer. So the question is, where do you consider yourself on the scale when it comes to DEIB knowledge and insights? This is a super valuable question for me to see answered before I continue, because it gives me an idea of where we are all sitting with our own journey of DEIB. So the 3 selections that you have, what is DEIB? So that would be our beginner folks. You've heard some acronyms, but that's pretty much where it ends. You've got a little bit of an idea. You know what DEI is. Number 2, or selection B, I know the basics. I can maybe list off what DEIB stands for, and or have been involved in some kind of DEIB project, but I'm not super confident about what it really means. And then a little throwback to some early 2000s, down with DEIB. I've been working in this field, or I've worked in a company that has a DEIB program. So if you can go into polls and just select your answer, I'm going to give you a second. And then I'm going to take a look and get a little bit of a pulse as to where we're all sitting with our DEIB knowledge before I continue. It is also super important to note that there are no wrong answers. And while you may be at the basics now, you could be down with DEIB in a few months, or you could be down with DEIB right now, leave kind of the space for a bit, and then need to learn some things to get back up. So I go all over the map when it comes to DEIB. All right. So I'm hoping everyone's getting answered, and I'm going to move us over to our next slide. All right. So based on the poll responses, it's going to look like there is a variety of experiences in the room today, which is fantastic. I love it when we've got some beginners, some basics, some down with DEIBs, because it just adds some richness to any of the discussions that are going on as we go through the day. Well, the hour. So I want to start off with just a really quick rundown of what is DEIB. So for those who didn't catch it in the first kind of ramble on, DEIB stands for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. When we talk about the DEIB and what they all mean, I love to use a really great analogy from Brene Brown, where it talks about DEI as being invited to a party. I think we've all probably gone to an event, an occasion, a party at some point. So it's something that we can all kind of resonate with. And as we go through the DEIB, so I've added on the B part for Payworks because it's super important, but I'll give a little bit more of an explanation on the B. So diversity is essentially the variety of people that you invite to the party or to the dance. We want to ensure that we are inviting a diverse group of individuals that is reflective of the communities or the organization that we work in, so that we have that richness of diversity within our team, within our attendees that are coming to our party. Equity, which is defined as fair treatment, access, and advancement for each person in an organization, refers to the ability to get to the party. So when we're talking about equity in the sense of a party, we are ensuring that everyone has the same ability to get to this party. What does that mean? Someone might need a bus pass to get to the party. Someone might need to join someone else for a carpool. Someone might need childcare to attend the party. Or do we want to make this an all ages event? So when we look at equity, it's not the same as equality. And that's, a whole nother hour-long conversation that I won't be getting too deep into today. But equity and equality are very different statements and very different practices. Equity means that we are providing fair opportunity for everyone, removing barriers, reducing barriers, and also acknowledging our own privilege when it comes to how we move through society. So when we talk about the party, we want to make sure that everyone has an equal and equitable opportunity to get to the party. Inclusion means that everyone feels welcomed and valued by the people and environment around them for exactly who they are. There's no expectations for anyone to change or mold or fit into any kind of certain sets of norms. And we're going to talk about that a lot more when it comes to our hiring practices. So when it comes to the party, we want to make sure that everyone feels welcome to attend this party just as who they are. They feel safe, they feel included, they feel like they don't have to change themselves to be at this party. They don't have to fit any kind of mold. They just belong as who they are, which leads us into the B of belonging. So belonging takes the form of employees actively wanting to bring their authentic and favorite selves to work because they know it will be celebrated and admired. So when it comes to our party analogy, this means that folks really want to attend this party. They feel like this party and this dance is for them. And they also feel like not only can they attend this party, but they can dance at the party. And I know, being a teenager, I didn't always feel like I could dance at a party. And now as an adult working in a really amazing organization, I feel like I'm invited to the party. I can get to the party. I can show up as exactly who I am, and I want to dance. And that's the beauty of DEIB and what it can bring to an organization. Why did we add the B? Well, Payworks sees belonging as a really important part of the DEIB journey. We don't want people to just come in to work and try to fit in some way, or try to hide parts of themselves, or feel a need to hide parts of themselves, because that is expending energy that doesn't need to be expended on hiding themselves, when it could be spent on bringing their favorite selves to work and doing the best work that they can do. And I go really deep into that in a different workshop. So I'm going to kind of cut it off there because I can ramble for a while. And we're going to move on to more of the tech mashup topic of tech talent and integration into DEIB. So hopefully that gives everybody a level playing field when it comes to what DEIB is. And now we can kind of move on to some more topics within integrating DEIB into our tech and talent strategies. So what exactly does it mean to embed DEIB into a strategy? Does it mean we have to have our very own DEIB strategy? Not necessarily, but it does mean that when we're looking at our organizational strategy, we do want to ensure that DEIB is inserted and embedded in all aspects of that strategy if we actually want it to be meaningful and impactful. And why is this super important? As I mentioned before, it's not just about putting a statement on your website saying that you are a diverse and inclusive workforce. It's nice to do that, but if you can't back it up, it's going to open you up to possibly some friction. So oftentimes I do hear about an organization or a company that promotes a really great DEIB culture on their website. And then someone clicks onto their website and they start to kind of look at their organizational structure, and they find out that in their board of directors, in their executive management team, there's not a whole lot of diversity. So where does their diversity lie? Oftentimes we see organizations where diversity is evident in your entry-level positions. And then as we move kind of up into middle management, as we move into supervisory positions, middle management, executive board, we see that diversity dropping off. And there's a number of different reasons as to why that happens. But one of kind of the main things that we focus on from a DEIB standpoint is that the folks who are starting in those entry-level positions aren't being mentored, aren't being sponsored, aren't being nurtured to go through kind of the promotion process and move through the organization in a meaningful way. And what that means is that we see more attrition in those entry-level positions. And we see a lot of churn kind of happening within those positions and within those diversity characteristics. So integration must mean more than just a diverse entry-level position hiring strategy. There needs to be leadership accountability to promote DEIB and help folks to feel like they can bring their authentic selves to work, their favorite selves to work, because that is an important part of being able to give your all within an organization. We also have to look at how to retain and grow that talent. We have to look at things like culturally safe workspaces. If we put in a hiring strategy to increase our diversity, but we don't have culturally safe workspaces, we're going to be bringing folks into an organization in a situation that does not resonate with them and doesn't feel safe to them. And we're going to lose the trust of those different diverse groups within our communities. And it's going to shrink our amazing talent pool that we can be drawing from. So here at Payworks, we have been working on a fully embedded and integrated 3-year DEIB strategy that's a year and a half in the making or so. It includes community outreach. It includes working with diverse groups and talent agencies and community organizations in order to diversify our talent strategy. And one of the really amazing kind of things that we can see from these diverse hiring strategies is that we can start off kind of focusing on one group. For example, here in Winnipeg, we were focusing on bilingual talent. And so we were looking at different bilingual markets. And what we ended up finding is that those bilingual community organizations also were welcoming a lot of newcomers to Canada. So in the process of finding bilingual talent, we were also tapping into a different group of folks, which were newcomers to Canada. And that's one of the intersectional amazing pieces of kind of embedding those diverse strategies into your organization, is that they have unintended benefits that end up being really long lasting and really amazing as well. So how do you know that you have embedded DEIB into your organization in a meaningful way? So often we hear, what are our tangibles? What are our KPIs? What are our metrics? How do we know that this is working? Here to tell you, sometimes a lot of those metrics and those KPIs lean towards the intangible side of the world. But we can look at things like an inclusion maturity model, or in this case, we can look at an equity continuum. So an equity continuum has essentially become a recognized industry measurement methodology for initiatives related to diversity, inclusion, and human equity. So basically, you can take a look at your organization. You can do a little bit of a needs analysis. You can do a little bit of investigation and kind of see where you're sitting when it comes to DEIB. Are you sitting at a level 1 where you are essentially ensuring that your practices are compliant with legislation? So we're focused on equality at this point. We really want to ensure that we are just motivated by that fear of non-compliance. Nothing wrong with being in the compliance phase. That is generally the first phase that an organization goes through when we're working on our DEIB embedding in our strategy. But we do eventually want to get to the inclusive and equitable side of the equity continuum. So how do we get there? Well, we continue moving and we move beyond compliance. So in this case, we aim to support groups that are historically disadvantaged, recognizing benefits to kind of your internal and public images. Your initiatives go generally way beyond the compliance. But in this case, they generally stop if leadership or public interest that's driving those initiatives changes or falls away. So this is evident in organizations that are really pro DEIB, but then as soon as like a political or cultural landscape starts to shift, they're the first ones to say, you know what, we're good. We don't need to do that anymore, because they haven't taken the time to actually look at this as a business case. They're just looking at it more of like, oh, our public image can benefit from this. So next step, we're getting there. We're doing some good things. We're looking to work with historically disadvantaged groups, and we're getting to a good place. But make sure that you're coming at it from the right place, that it's not going to fall off if public perception shifts. Then we get into the business case. This is where we start to see that embedding coming in, and we're starting to see those really meaningful projects. We're starting to see the leveraging of diverse thought and experience. We're starting to see the benefit of having diverse teams, and inclusion of inclusion of thought and ideas in all levels of the organization from all different members of your organization. Representation numbers at this stage, and I'm going to talk more about demographic data collection as well. But the representation numbers are a means to an end rather than the focus of a diversity strategy. So when we're looking at our representation, our demographic information, we're looking at that in the case of how do we leverage our communities in a meaningful way. And then we get to integrated equity. So we're moving from a diversity focus to an inclusion focus. We're focusing on creating that work environment where each person is recognized as opposed to a focus on a group. And these are widely perceived as employers of choice. And then finally, we get to level 5, which is our inclusive and equitable organization. So they've achieved the vision of treating people based solely on the content of their character. And as we get kind of through towards the end of the presentation today, I'm going to talk a little bit more about culture fit versus culture add. And that's essentially what we're looking at when we are looking at treating people based on the content of their character and not on how they're going to fit and blend into an organization. Okay. I'm trying to be mindful of time here, so I'm going to keep moving forward. I could probably talk for hours on each of these topics, so I'm going to keep it light. All right, so our next kind of pillar within this conversation is attracting and retaining talent with inclusive practices. Inclusive hiring starts way before the interview. It starts way before somebody walks through the door. It actually starts with the crafting of your job postings. So when we are looking at crafting those job postings, sorry, we want to ensure that our job postings are designed to be inclusive and free of any form of bias. Now, when you actually look into your job postings or any job postings that are out there, you might take a glance at them and think to yourself, oh, this looks pretty inclusive. This looks pretty great. But you can start digging in and start to see, some areas for improvement. So when you're looking at a job posting for yourself, or if you're a job seeker looking at a job posting, look at them with a critical eye. Ask yourself, do I see any specifically gendered language throughout the posting? We shouldn't be seeing any kind of he, she narrative. We should be looking at more of they, them narrative so that we can keep, everybody's expectations and drawing someone to our job posting to be at an equitable state. Also look at some of the descriptive words that are being used. So it's not just about the specific direct language. It can also be any kind of descriptive words. Disclaimer on this section, when we talk about removing descriptive words or reducing the amount of descriptive words, we get into some forms of like stereotypical language. And you might think to yourself, well, that's not just indicative of a masculine gender, and that's not indicative of a feminine gender. It could be either way. This is very true. But when we're looking at kind of historical use of language, some of the language that I'm going to allude to is generally seen as more masculine or more feminine. So when you're crafting a job posting or a job description, rather than using terms like aggressive or dominant or competitive nature, which could lend itself to a bit more of a masculine undertone, use terms like results-driven, goal-oriented, or motivated to succeed, which can kind of neutralize a bit of that playing field and make it a little bit more inclusive. On the other hand, using terms like nurturing, supportive, or warm personality may come across as more feminine coded. And please remember when I'm saying, these are very stereotypical. This is not the general thought, but it can be how things are perceived. Use terms like strong interpersonal skills, collaborative and team-oriented, or empathetic communicator as alternatives. As I mentioned, this is obviously some tricky water to navigate, but the end goal is always the same. Make opportunities equitable for all qualified job seekers in order to find your top talent. A few more little quick tips on using descriptive language. Use chairperson rather than chairman, flight attendant rather than stewardess, workforce or person power as opposed to manpower. A lot of these terminologies and these words that we use are so ingrained in our vocabulary that it can take a really pointed and focused effort to remove them from our vocabulary, but it does end up creating a really, more inclusive environment for everyone that's involved. So those are just a few kind of highlights to look at when you are getting ready to post a job or you're looking at a job posting itself. Being in the talent acquisition and DEIB space, this is one of the most important things in my portfolio, which is reducing interview bias. So you have your posting, it's ready, it's free from any inherent bias, you've had it checked by a few people, and now you're posting. Where are you posting, and what is your interview strategy once you find your candidates? When we're looking at where to post, we may need to look into community benefits organizations, which can help kind of widen the net, which can help reach audiences that you may not have seen before. If we're just relying on Indeed, if we're just relying on LinkedIn, we could be really narrowing that job search in ways that we can't anticipate. So get out there, understand who your community benefits organizations are, and see about job postings that can be on a diversity job board, an ability job board, which can really help to expand your search. Now, when we're looking at interviews, a lot of work goes into ensuring that our interview and hiring teams are trained properly. They are looking at interviews in a bias-free kind of lens. So that should be kind of step number one. Ensure that the people who are performing your interviews and your hiring team who are resume screening understand what unconscious bias is and understand interviews and different personalities and neurodiversity and all of those things that make people the awesome individuals that they are. But sometimes if we don't understand someone, we could have a different thought as to what they're presenting. So having that embedded in your employee culture is really important, and just taking the time to ensure that your hiring teams are comfortable and prepared is a huge step forward. If you can structure interviews, it does help to reduce bias. So if we're looking at things like consistent questions, diverse panels, and using scorecards, it can go a long way into reducing any of those personal biases you may have. And essentially at the end of the day, at the end of the interview, you're ranking that person based on their answers to a standard set of questions. This is fantastic. It helps you to kind of gauge someone based on their ability to perform the job tasks as opposed to their ability to schmooze. Or their ability to kind of fit into what your idea of a perfect candidate could be. The kind of flip side to that is it can remove a little bit of the humanity from the interview process, which we don't want to do. We still want people to be comfortable. You still want to have conversations. You still want to get to know someone. So you may need to look at those structured interview questions with a little flexibility. So being able to reframe a question, reassuring someone, take the time that you need, ask clarifying questions. I know for myself, sometimes I need to hear things like 1 or 2 times before they sink in. So you may need to repeat yourself, and that shouldn't be seen as kind of a negative stamp placed on that person's interview file. It could just mean that they need to see something in order for it to register. So there's a lot of different ways we can take that structure, but then also have the flexibility to have that individualistic and humanity-based way of performing an interview. And I did allude to this earlier, but this is kind of like my favorite thing to speak about when it comes to hiring and the hiring process is removing fit from your hiring conversations. So often we hear the statement, are they a good culture fit? Are they a good fit for the team? Are they going to fit in with the organization? Take a second and just think about how that might be a bit of a biased way of looking at an interview strategy or a hiring strategy. What I coach our interviewing and panel and hiring hiring team panels to speak about and to look for is a culture ad, or a team ad, or an organizational ad. We don't want to hire the same people that are going to fit perfectly into our organization every time, because then we are going to lose that diversity of thought. We're going to lose those amazing inclusive ideas that come along with that diverse team that we've been building. So if you can take one thing away from this today, remove fit from those conversations and replace it with ad. And that's just one small change you can make to flip a mindset in order to kind of change and embed DEIB into that hiring strategy. Okay, next topic, building psychologically safe workspaces. So this is our third topic within tech talent and belonging, and it's a huge one when we lean into belonging and also the attraction and retention of our top talent. Building psychologically safe cultures directly fuels innovation, creativity, and collaboration, and is especially critical in our technology teams. So what does psychological safety mean? Psychological safety, and honestly, this again could be a whole day workshop. So if you are an expert in psychological safety, this is a real little snippet. If you're not, this is just an intro to psychological safety, and you can learn so much more. But psychological safety is essentially your ability to speak up, to take risks, and to be authentic in a workplace without the fear of negative consequences. So those all kind of have to go hand in hand. In order to be comfortable speaking up, taking risks, being authentic, there does need to be that culture and that workplace psychological safety model that helps you to understand that if you take a risk and it doesn't work out exactly as you intended, that your organization will be there to support you, that you don't necessarily have to fear the consequences as boldly, I suppose, and that there is that support there. Because we only get to those really, truly amazing, innovative, and cutting edge ideas when we feel safe to take risks. If we feel like we have to have the same ideas and we have to follow the same roadmap, the same procedures that have always been done that way, we're just going to be the same organization that gets surpassed by the one that is safe and comfortable taking risks. And as we talked about kind of at the beginning of our chat, culture change and shifts start with the executive level and management leadership of an organization. So if you're leaders, and if you are a leader who shows vulnerability and openness, that's modeling that right behavior. If you're able to have those candid conversations with your teams and normalize feedback going in both directions, that really helps to build that psychological safety. If your team members feel comfortable coming to you and saying, hey, you know what, I really think we should work on this idea. I really think that thing that you tabled, we need to move forward with that if we want to be competitive. If your team members don't feel safe doing that, you're never going to get that innovation that you want. So as a leader, if you are a leader, and if you are not a leader, think about this in the context of being a part of meetings and brainstorming sessions and all of that kind of fun stuff. But if you are a leader, how do you encourage inclusive meeting practices? Do you even think about inclusive meeting practices? What behaviors or norms in meetings can make everyone feel the most included, the most psychologically safe to speak up, take risks, and be authentic in those meetings? There's a few tactics that can be utilized. You can have a rotation of facilitators that will help everyone to kind of get that practice. Ensure all voices are heard. Easier said than done. So if you've led a team or been a part of a team, you probably recognize that there are a number of different personalities, a number of different people, a number of different ways that people communicate within our teams. And ensuring that all voices are heard isn't as easy as going, does anyone else have anything to say? Because you got your introverts, you've got your people who are shy, you've got your people who blush as soon as they start talking, which was me like 20 years ago. And so you've got to find ways to help those folks be included and feel safe and comfortable speaking up. You can go connect with folks before the meeting, ask them if they have any ideas, ask them if there's any way that they need you to support them in speaking up, ask them if they want you to champion their idea while giving them credit. So there's a number of different ways to look at it, and not just looking at it from the standpoint of the quiet people don't have ideas or don't want to collaborate. A lot of times they just can't get past the public speaking at first until they feel psychological safety. And the last one on this, avoid groupthink. Set ground rules for constructive feedback, encourage critical discussion of ideas. If your team is scared to challenge you on things, you're never going to advance into the innovation that you're looking for. So creating that psychological safety environment is super key to having that innovation. And I am monitoring my time, and I think I'm doing okay. We are moving into our last section, which is leveraging tech to reduce bias and increase equity. As promised, we will talk a bit about tech here today too. It's really important to understand the benefits and the risks of utilizing tech to help streamline and reduce bias. As we're getting into the age of generative AI and AI tools and note-taking tools and screening tools, they all seem really amazing and awesome, and they're going to increase productivity and reduce the time it takes to screen resumes and all of those amazing benefits that come along with it. But if we are not approaching technology and AI from an ethical standpoint, we could be getting ourselves into some really tricky situations. So thinking about tech, we need to understand that tech isn't neutral, especially when we're looking at AI. It's not a neutral technology. It reflects the data and values that we're feeding into it. So if we're not understanding those ethical implications, if we're not understanding how we train AI, if we are not putting checks and balances in place, we could be getting into some situations that some companies in the news are currently going through when it comes to AI introducing bias into a process. There was a 2024 research from Pennsylvania's Lehigh University that showed a sample of 6,000 loan applications from 2022 where the chatbots recommended denials for more Black applicants than identical white counterparts. So essentially their chatbot AI, their generative AI that they were using, was pulling from historically biased data that was introducing that historical bias into their current technology. I could go through a lot of those stats, but I'm going to make sure we get through all of our talking points today. But if you want to look up that, if you really want to look up any kind of bias in AI, just pop it into Google. It's going to come up with a lot of options for you to read about, which is why it's so important that we focus on the ethics and utilization of AI in the proper way. So to kind of wrap up the main talking points, I just wanted to go over the good, the bad, and the bias of technology. From my standpoint right now, our team is looking at using some form of AI in a very ethical and fitting in with our AI strategy kind of way to help us with resume screening. It's one of our more laborious tasks that we have within talent acquisition. So if we're looking at resume screeners, they can be super valuable in reducing gender or ethnicity biases. But as I mentioned with the mortgage loan application, it could also increase bias if it's not trained properly and can introduce more bias into a screening process. There is currently a company that is undergoing an active lawsuit. The folks that are putting forward the lawsuit are alleging that there's bias within the technology that screens out applicants over the age of 40, which is a very strong allegation to be facing. And it's one of those consequences that helps us to really feel the need to ensure that we are training that AI properly, that we are conducting bias audits. So once we have gone through the whole process of ethical training of our AI, we've got it kind of trained from all of these perfect case uses, we've tested it out, we're ready to deploy, we still need to go in and do some human bias audits to ensure that, you know, some bias hasn't creeped in that we didn't know about, that we're not all of a sudden seeing a demographic that's been completely screened out of our process. And so keeping that human touch, keeping that humanity in the process is going to be absolutely key to using AI successfully within organizations. Looking at your demographic data, I'm not going to touch too much on this, but using technology to help collect demographic data and then to also kind of help utilize it in a variety of different ways can be super valuable to an organization. If you've got demographic data being collected and you can use technology and AI to layer that onto survey information, you can layer it onto your leave and attrition rates within your organization, you can essentially see trends within different demographics when it comes to employee satisfaction, when it comes to who's leaving your organization, when it comes to who's joining your organization, and you can start to see where certain demographics may be dropping out of your organization. At what point are they leaving? And then finally, involve your diverse voices. So we've gone through all of this work, we've put in all of this embedding, and we've brought these diverse folks into our organization. Don't just bring them in as a token. Make sure you're involving their diverse voices. If we have essentially kind of a blanket statement, if we have an organization that all looks the same, went to the same schools, grew up in the same areas, roughly the same age, we are not going to get very innovative thoughts. Things will hit the market that shouldn't have if they had someone from a diverse background take a look and see if there was any kind of pain points that could be coming out of this. So look for that diversity, look for your culture ads, apply to organizations where you may not see yourself yet, if you're comfortable doing that, and be a change maker. But essentially, DEIB is not just an acronym we're throwing around. It's not the dirty word that the media would like to say that it is. It is a really strong strategy that, when embedded into an organization in the right way, can really make that business case, can really transform your organization, and can also help you to be, the best contributor to an organization that you can be. So what do you need in order to take off? So as we talked about today, the things that you need to take off would be integration and embedding of DEIB into your organization, build your inclusive hiring practices, make some ethical use of your technology, and also ensure that your organization has strong psychological safety so that when you introduce that diversity into your organization, folks know why they're there, they want to stay there, and they want to encourage their friends to come there as well. So what can you do leaving this tech mashup today? If you have the ability, audit some kind of process within your hiring or product cycle for any equity gaps. Start a conversation with a coworker or a leader about embedding DEIB into your organizational strategy, and take the opportunity to learn more if you're curious or wanting to learn more about DEIB. And of course, if you do have any questions, we are going to be having a Q&A. And if you do want to see more great resources from Payworks, you can check out our blog at payworks.ca. And I believe my information has been dropped in the chat, so I would love to connect with you as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Charlie, for sharing all of your knowledge. We are now opening the floor to questions. So you'll see just on the right-hand side, there's the chat, and then there's also a Q&A box. There's already quite a few questions in there, which is amazing. If you can't think of a question off the top of your head and you see any in there that resonate with you, feel free to upvote them. We'll kind of go from the top down for about the next 10 minutes here. Okay. So the first one is, what advice would you give someone early in their DEIB journey, but face resistance from within their organization?
That is a really tricky situation to be in, because if you are already wanting to be in that DEIB journey, you know how important it is, and you know the impacts of DEIB and how it can impact your organization. And you may face resistance, which can happen. So my advice on that would be kind of start small, where you can. Start with like little bites of DEIB, start to embed it into the language that you're using, start to use that inclusive language that I was speaking about. It's not just for job postings, it's for your everyday conversations. One really sticky word that kind of is hard to pull out of people's vocabulary is the word guys. So a small way that you can kind of start to sprinkle DEIB is taking guys out of your conversation. So instead of saying, hey guys, you can say, hey folks, or hey y'all. I was a big y'all user. So people who contacted me by email for the longest time thought I was Southern. Very much not. But it is a really inclusive way to not gender out people in conversation. So my advice would really be to start small, find your champions. There will be people that agree with you and want to help you out. So find those champions that can kind of help you with your journey as well.
Wonderful advice. Yeah, I think language, obviously, you touched on it so much, but it's so important in making people feel included.
Absolutely.
Okay, this one's a little more tech. In the context of AI and data-driven decision-making, how do we design systems that actively promote inclusion rather than replicate past inequities? So I guess sort of like you were speaking about with that funding, where it was being selective of who got the funding based on past biases. How do we make sure we're designing systems that aren't doing that?
So that's a really great question. And as not a data developer or software developer, I will answer this the best way I can, which is to not just rush into that process. Make sure that you're taking the time to understand best practices, to understand current practices, to understand how to train AI. I just was a part of a 2-day conference as well about the ethical use of AI and DEIB, which had a lot of great takeaways, which included understanding how to train your AI. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest steps into ensuring that your AI and data-driven decision making is coming from an ethical place, is really understanding how to do it, making sure that you have an AI strategy in your organization. And then, as I mentioned, doing those human checks is going to be really important as well. As much as we want to lean on technology to make things more streamlined, easier, less cost for your organization, we do still need to make sure that we're not rushing into something and that we have a human touch that comes with it.
Absolutely. Cheryl has a question for us. With DEIB, and how do you find them in the marketplace? So is there like a certification or any sort of like way that you can see a company as a champion? I don't know if that's a thing.
Yeah, so there are multiple certifications that exist. There's some that are focused on demographics. I know you can get rainbow certified in some cases. And there's other ways that you can kind of tap into those different demographics and be certified in those areas. You can look for employers who are diversity certified. So there's different kinds of certifications that can exist. The only thing that I would caution someone against, if you're looking for a certification to tell you that an organization is compliant, is that they're not all created equal. So
Absolutely.
if someone is wanting to get certified, you can check a bunch of boxes. You can pay a fee sometimes. You can answer all the questions in the right way, but they may not actually be practicing what they're checking off. So you can look for a certification and then dig into a company's website a little bit, see what they're actually doing to promote DEIB in their organization. Take a look at their organizational structure, which is also very telling. doing. And really, call them up and have a conversation. The amount of times that has happened within organizations I've worked for, be prepared to have those conversations. I want to work with your organization. You say you're DEIB certified. What does that mean to you? Make sure that you can articulate what you're talking about as an organization, but also don't be afraid to ask an organization what they're doing. If they're truly doing it, they should be able to answer the question and would be more than happy to answer the question.
I'm just going to rally off that a little bit because I know you do talent acquisition a little as well. Is there a great way to word it in a job interview? If DEIB is important to you and you want to make sure you're applying to somewhere that would be in line with your personal goals, is there a way you could word it or something specifically you've seen done that was really well or that you would recommend?
I honestly, when I sit in interviews, I get that question a lot because of my title, because of the way that I speak about it. People are more comfortable kind of asking what that looks like. But honestly, if you are a job seeker and you are in an interview, regardless of who you're talking to, they should be able to answer the question. If they're not, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, there's a red flag right there.
Right, super red flag. But if you ask something like, what is your DEIB strategy within your organization? Do you have a focus on DEIB? Do you have DEIB metrics, goals, KPIs? So kind of look into questions like that. And I'm going to plug some tech for a second, I guess, AI. Throw some questions into ChatGPT and workshop them a little bit. I do that often. So that's also a great way to understand and be able to articulate the questions that you want answered in order to really understand the culture and kind of the goalposts that the organization you're looking at is aiming for.
Perfect. This next question is sort of exactly on the same topic, but you talk about embedding DEIB into strategy. So what are some key indicators that tell you a company has successfully done this beyond surface level initiatives? So how can you really see?
Super tricky from the outside sometimes. Sometimes they might be making those changes from the inside in order to promote to the outside. So it might be a little bit hidden from public view, but you can ask some questions. But key indicators could be where an organization shows up in the community that they work in. That's a huge indicator of, a strong diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging focus. Is it just writing a check, or do they go show up? Do they actually support the organizations from more than a monetary standpoint that they say are important to them? That's a really big indicator. If I keep saying, look at the organizational structure. It's such an easy thing to do, but it is a really strong indicator. If an organization says we are pro women in tech, and then you look at their org structure and it is all men at the top, that's a really strong indicator that either they may be really early on in their journey, so ask a few questions, or they actually really don't believe in it and they just want to put that out there to hire some entry-level positions, check the box, and move on.
Absolutely. Awesome. And then I think this will sort of be the last question. We have about 2 minutes left, and you did sort of touch on it towards the end, but what role do you see AI playing in the future of DEIB in the workplace?
Well, AI is here to stay. is the one thing that we are trending towards, that we're noticing in the workplace. So the role that AI is playing is it does really tend to level the playing field and provide equitable opportunities if used in the right way. If an organization is using AI in an ethical way, anonymizing resumes is such a huge impact that we don't necessarily think about. So if you take somebody's name out of a resume, the way that makes an equitable experience in some cases is immeasurable. Well, not really, you can measure it, but it is a huge impact within an organization within that equity lens. So really taking it and using it in that ethical way to create equity is where I see AI playing in the future of DEIB in the workplace. We can only do so much as humans with unconscious bias, implicit bias, and all of those things that exist. So sometimes having AI step in and help you out to just check those biases can really make a strong step towards equity. And that is one of my huge personal pillars in life is equity. And so I just see it all working together in a really beautiful way.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time, your insights, your experience. Thank you for sharing with us today. Your perspective on building inclusive, people-centered strategies is inspiring and incredibly practical. It's clear you have passion for what you're doing right now, and doing right by people truly guides what you do. So we're grateful to have a chance to learn from you.
Thank you so much. And thanks for having me. This was really fun and amazing. So appreciate the
Thank you.
opportunity.
And thank you everybody who joined. Thank you everyone for asking questions. There is so many of them today, so I appreciate it. We're now going to return to our tables. So the floor will still be open for another 15 minutes or so. Enjoy the chance to connect with peers, and hopefully we'll see you at future Tech Mashup events.
Thank you so much.